Modi is going to come and he is just, he'll just have to live with it. He has resigned to his fate.
I will let the people of India decide whether Modi comes in 2024 or not.
The Taj Mahal was once a Hindu temple, and many other unfounded allegations sprouted in public by those like Uttar Pradesh CM Adityanath.
Hindutva will always face this opposition as of now. The goal is to educate, use whatever resources we have, use facts from history.
As I write this article, a WhatsApp forward from a Bhakta family.
That is why this article that we are discussing cannot be taken seriously, and that is why wire.in cannot be taken seriously.
I personally am not offended, and I am open to somebody making a case as to why I should be offended.
Hindus are just beginning to acknowledge it. And as Hindus do that, there are elements around the world that do not want that to happen.
I want to welcome everyone to Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact, which is a policy research and advocacy initiative of World Hindu Council of America. We come live every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern. And at Hindu Pact, we talk about the contemporary American Hindu issues. My name is Ajay Shah. I am the president of World Hindu Council. And with me, as always, is Utsav Chakrabarti. Utsavda is the executive director of Hindu Pact, and he is now a very well-known Hindu intellectual. He opines on all things Hindu is in America and around the world, and I'm always glad to hear his views. So welcome to Hindu Pact.
Thank you, Ajay bhai. Namaste, everybody. And it is a nice Sunday morning. As always, we come at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and I'm very happy that Ajay bhai calls me intellectual, because now I feel exalted and in the hallowed halls of thought leaders who have been called intellectuals before us. People like Amartya Sen and people, professors of JNU and Harvard and Berkeley. And so, I feel very good about myself now, Ajay bhai.
A lot of times we have, a well-defined topic, and sometimes we say, hey, there are so many different things to discuss. Let's bring all of them together. So this week we are talking about Hindu issues today, this week rather, because there were quite a few articles that came out this week, and I figured that we need to kind of spend some time discussing multiple articles instead of just on multiple news items rather than just talk about one. So this is the Wire magazine that many people know. The Wire magazine has an article. It says, "My father wants his Hindu Rashtra, and he has wants a Hindu Rashtra, and he has now become a troll." Written by Harshit Rakheja. Now, Harshit Rakheja is a Delhi-based journalist, and I'm sure nobody knew him till today, and we just kind of helped make him famous. So this is an interesting article. The reason I bring this up is because this is a generational divide, and we have seen this generational divide happen in various places in America, in India, and other places as well, but not as much in India. But I think the reason, even though this journalist is kind of based in India and he has written this article, I figured that this is an article that is worth commenting upon by us, mostly because this is much more pronounced. This particular effect, the generational effect, is much more pronounced in America than it is in India, and it is evolving. There are there are multiple reasons for that. We have discussed about it, and that is that within a family, the people who have experienced India, who know the history of India, have a much closer identification with issues in India, and they understand the dynamics of the current political situation in India. After India's independence, when the JNU's, Jawaharlal Nehru University was started, and the Indian Constitution was written, these were blatantly anti-Hindu in many aspects of it. In fact, having non-uniform civil codes and preferential treatment of minorities to an extent where in the early 2000s or mid to I believe it was in 2010 when the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said, hey, the minorities are the first right to India's resources, rather than say that India's resources belong to everyone.
What you show about the article is correct. It's a generational divide, but I look at it from three different angles. There is a huge section of youth with Hindu names, both around the world as well as in India, urban India especially, which is quite anti-Hindu and does see its parents' generation, anything that they do when it comes to socio-political activism regarding Hindus, they look at them as, quote unquote, right wing, or, they associate Hindutva as a negative connotation. So that is true. And this article is an example of that. But let us look at it from a couple of angles. There are three or four main angles that we have to understand before, and this is not something unique to the Hindu community. Let me put it very clearly. Other communities around the world which have gone through long periods of subjugation, enslavement, genocides, like the Hindus, also have faced similar problems. If you look into the Jewish community in Europe and in America, it has gone through this problem in the last 20 years. They are really concerned about it as well. Another community, again, relating to the Western context, is the Armenian community. And they have seen a similar trend within their communities also. What is unique in their communities is that they faced massive genocides, both the Jews and the Armenians, in the last 120 years. Hindus are just beginning to acknowledge it. And as Hindus do that, there are elements around the world that do not want that to happen, because it changes the nature of how 1.2 billion, 1.4 billion people behave. It awakens them and pushes them into a new role around the world, which many people don't like, especially the ones who committed those genocides. So they are going to work very hard to influence the next generation of Hindus to not accept them. In fact, make Hindutva and acceptance of the reality of Hindu genocide toxic. And that is exactly what these guys are doing. So the article that you see from wire.in that you showed about how there is a divide between between the earlier generation that wants to talk about Hindutva, wants to talk about Hindu genocides and the victimhood that Hindus have gone through for so many centuries. Their next generation will be encouraged by powers that be, and they do have power. They control media. You look at New York Times, Washington Post, they do control the media, as much as we don't want to hear that or don't want to talk about it. So yes, Hindutva will always face this opposition as of now. The goal is to educate, use whatever resources we have, use facts from history, use real content that nobody can replicate. There is, even if we are an underdog, even if we do not have the power in the campuses, we do not have the power in the media, we still have the power of truth on our side. And I think that is very important for everybody to understand, because at the end, if we do put out the truths that we know or we are fully aware of and we know of.
You see around us where the monuments of slavery are coming down. At least especially in last 1 year, they've been coming down for quite some time. And there is a move to change the names of the streets, change the names of the universities, change the name of the state. Rhode Island have passed the resolution to change the official name of the state from Rhode Island Plantations to Rhode Island. And if you look around, and there are stock of reparations for slavery that are going on. So it seems to me, Sada, that the world is moving in the opposite direction, where the rest of the world is saying that, look, there are historic wrongs that have been committed, and these historic wrongs need to be corrected. But when it comes to Hindus, the world is going in the other direction. So every time when Hindus, say that, hey, look, there were historic wrongs that were committed to Hindus, the first opposition that we get. We obviously get the opposition for those who have wronged Hindus, the various hues and colors and creeds of colonialists. But the second one, which is a much more difficult to fathom, is the opposition and vehement opposition that we get from second and third generation Hindus, who instead of connecting with history like the other, like Armenians are connecting, or the Jews at one time at least connected to Holocaust and still continue to do so, or the African Americans who have connected back to slavery and tried to put the history in that perspective. Hindu kids are not doing that.
That's because Hindus are not talking about those genocides in an organized manner. There has not been a consistent one generation of conversation, honest conversation on this topic. That is why the Hindu kids are not. So what is happening here is that Hindus do not control the narrative. When the Jewish Americans or the Jews in diaspora had control over that narrative, they talked about it, and they talked about it for more than a generation. And that's why people are aware of the genocide they went through, and they empathize with the victims today, rightfully so. Similarly with the Armenians, they successfully built the narrative that was true and based on reality of their genocide under the Ottoman Muslims in the early part of the 20th century. So they had a generation and a half of full control and honesty in their narrative. The problem with the Hindus is that very few Hindus even know it themselves. We never actually talked about it. So when you begin to talk about it, here's the difference with when we compare it to the, and I like the fact that we are looking at it by comparing it to the Jewish communities and the Armenian communities. But our problem is that they had the narrative for a generation and a half. They might be losing it in some places. We don't even have that anymore. We never had it. So we didn't start talking about it. Then we started talking about it. Now we don't talk about it anymore. So it's barely touching the surface. And obviously the other side controls the narrative. I mean, I bring everybody to the mainstream media's narrative on Hindus. It's basically what CAIR wants, or what some globalist Marxist group wants. So it is not even hidden anymore. I mean, people are now openly talking about it. They don't even hide it. I mean, George Soros goes and meets Imran Khan to talk about how they can contain India. It's in the news. So what do you want? You don't have control over the narrative. And it is an uphill task, because people like you, me, people, hundreds of thousands of Hindus around the world who do know the truth and want to share it, we even do not have the platform. For example, if we talk about it, we will be attacked. So, and we will be attacked by the same people who have attacked us physically in the past 1,000 years.
So I continue reading from this article, and here is a paragraph that you may want to opine on. He says that I know that this struggle is not mine alone. Others of my ilk, journalists, struggle to come to terms with the irony that is our lives. Our workday consists of separating facts from fiction, double-checking every bit of news to ensure that our reports are factually correct. But while scrolling through Facebook or WhatsApp, we see our family members as vectors of misinformation, convinced that the Taj Mahal was once a Hindu temple, and many other unfounded allegations sprouted in public by those like Uttar Pradesh CM Adityanath. So it's very interesting. If I were to share this article, you will see that every little bit of information or misinformation that this so-called journalist wants to present, he puts it as a link to other articles written by his leftist friends. But when it comes to some of the articles, the historic challenges that people have presented from the other side, such as whether Taj Mahal was really, what was the history of Taj Mahal? Let's go and investigate. No harm investigating. I'm, as scientists, anthropologists, and archaeologists, people want to seek truth. So, and people have asked for this to be investigated, and we don't know, but let's go and investigate before we rule it out. But he would not put a link there to the the challenges that are posed. So for him, this is just a fact. why would you question it? But really, the science and history uh, is written, is not written and cast in stone that can never be challenged. At one time, people believed that the world is flat. Somebody went and challenged it, right? So there's no harm, and other than people's narrow political interests or egos, when something gets challenged and gets investigated and gets ruled out. But this is the kind of writing that passes as journalism in today. The other thing he does is to use the word bhakta. Now, as you know, so the bhakta is a devotee or a worshipper. There's an entire bhakti movement in Hindu Dharma. Bhakti is a form of worship among the 6 different forms of worship. Bhakti Marg, among the 4 different margs of Bhakti Marg is like Gyan Marg and Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. These are the modes or ways of achieving God, right? So the leftists have now come up with with a term to denigrate Hindus and to attack Hindu politicians at the same time by calling people who support Hindu causes as bhaktas. And so now they're killing 2 birds at the same time. They're denigrating the Hindu Dharma and the Bhakti movement and Bhakti Marga or Bhakti Yoga. And at the same time, they are talking about they're taking down the political opponents on these websites. And so this guy goes around and writes, as I write this article, a WhatsApp forward from a Bhakta family member employs sarcasm to drum up support for BJP government.
That is why this article that we are discussing cannot be taken seriously, and that is why wire.in cannot be taken seriously. And I remember you mentioned in your talk a few minutes ago that Wire is a leftist. It's not even leftist. It has people who are leftists and who use the leftist line of thinking to target Prime Minister Modi of India. But it is essentially a media outlet that is a hit job outlet. Its job is to anything that Prime Minister Modi of India does, they have to counter it, and they will bring in leftist narrative into it. They will bring in Islamist narrative into it. They will bring in any narrative, obscurantist. If needed, they will bring in capitalist narrative. At the same time, this article also has deep layers of Hindu hate that is prevalent in the mainstream Indian society, and the use of the word bhakt is, as you say, gave a good example of. The Hindus have been dehumanized to a point where anything sacred to the Hindus is not actually sacred in the intellectual space, because it is just a bunch of irrational. That's how it is looked upon. It is looked upon as a bunch of irrational, incoherent, non-historical gibberish. So if you want to relate anything connected to Hindus with rationality and with historicity, it is very hard to do so in the intellectual space that is in India, and by extension that is outside India. But we have to be very cautious as well on this aspect, because there are a lot of Hindus, and many of them are very well-meaning people, who do fall for irrational historical content as well. And I have heard people that that talk about how there has been Hindus who ruled the entire world, and how they were Hindus in South America, and how they worshipped Lord Ganesha. So see, what is happening is the other side uses straw man fallacy perfectly to demean what is real. And as you said, and I completely agree with you, what is real historically also changes over a period of time. I mean, look at Aryan invasion theory. Aryan invasion theory was built by the colonial powers in the West, using linguistics as a guide to generate and perpetuate their own narrative on global domination. But now with genetics, Aryan invasion theory has been more or less completely debunked. But if you go and talk to an academic in the Indian setting, especially in the field of humanities, most of these journalists come from those fields, they continue to hold on to Aryan invasion theory.
So let me end this on a positive note. So this article, the last line of this article says, he's convinced. So this is Harshit Rakheja talking about his father. He's like, he's convinced that Modi will return for a third term. But the thought that a leader so visibly flushed with self-pride and arrogance could retain power in 2024 scares me much, much more than the virus. So I think so that, yeah, let me, this is Harshit Rakheja. Did you see what Harshit Rakheja is saying?
Yeah.
He is saying so that he's saying that is Modi is going to come and he is just he'll just have to live with it. That's he has resigned to his fate of living not only this term but this next term under Modi, and I think that's his fate, man. What can I say?
I will let the people of India decide whether Modi comes in 2024 or not, and I will leave that question aside. But what is more jarring and more worrying for us is that this is the level of journalism in India, where journalists who oppose an elected leader of the world's largest democracy actually are considering him worse than the coronavirus, and and have no compunctions in writing it. And the entire community, the journalist community outside India and within India, big chunk of it applauds it. So this
So
is
so
the
so can anyone else get away with some narrative like
that
this
is
when
what I'm
you
saying. So this is the level of dehumanization of Hindus in the world, where anybody who is even connected to Hindus and Hindutva can be dehumanized to a level of below that of a virus, a fatal virus. And there is absolutely nobody batting an eyelid on this. If it had happened regarding any other community in the world, African American community in America, Latino community in America, any other community around the world, this would have raised eyebrows and would have been considered a hate speech. And I think, one of the benefits that we have from on our side, from our perspective, is that the bar is set so low on educating people that even a little bit of education and a little bit of effort goes a long way in bringing people's awareness levels up. So Ajay bhai, I know you are a positive person and you always look at the positive side of things. So my suggestion to you and the rest of the Hindutva community out there is that people know so little that all it takes is a little bit of effort, a little bit of resources, and we will reach people who we have never reached before.
well said, Utsada. I think you deserve a applause for that. All right. Uh, so the next article that I have is equally, interesting article, and this is an article. Let me go to our slide, and I can share the title with you. And the title of the article is "The Zionist and Hindutva Playbook: Shoot and Then Cry." Okay. So this article, and we will go over the article a little bit, but basically this is an article that is equating the events that happened in Gaza and the events in Kashmir, and and it basically says that Hindus also as just as Jews, the Hindus and Jews, they share a trait where they go and attack and then they cry victim.
Ajay bhai, I want to talk a little bit about the author of this article, Farhan Mujahid Chak. And the title of the article, The Zionist and the Hindutva Playbook, Shoot and Then Cry, is a perfect title to show convergence of Hindu and Jewish interest and pit it against Islamic interest. And this is something that Farhan Mujahid Chak does. I'll tell you why he does it. Because just look at his personal background and where he comes from. So he's a Kashmiri origin Muslim who grew up in Pakistan, lived his life in Pakistan, in UK, and in Qatar. So, this is an individual whose entire career is based on pushing a Pakistani Qatari agenda at the academic level, targeting non-Muslims in the Indian subcontinent. This is basically his career. And, I don't see anybody from our side who would mirror such a career and make a living out of it. But these people do. So he's He's working with the university in Qatar. He writes for Al Jazeera. He writes for Al Sabah. Everything he writes is about a worldview where the Islamist is supposed to be the supremacist, looking outside, giving outside gaze to non-Islamist worldview and trying to dominate it. And this person is obviously going to write something targeting India and the Jews, and targeting Hindus and the Jews. But what is unique about the article is that it assumes one thing, that both Hindus and Jews, in the natural law of things, should not have the right to defend themselves. So, and this is a worldview that is very natural and very easy to get in the Islamist community, especially the radicalized Islamist community.
And so let me read. So well said, Utsada. So this is what the article says. It says that in fact the parallels between the Hindutva, the predominant form of Hindu nationalism in Kashmir and Zionism in the occupied Palestine are plenty. Yet the most disingenuous and carefully orchestrated strategy both fascisms deploy is to pursue the contradictory, irreconcilable policy of seeking sympathy from abroad while recklessly endangering the lives of the people under their occupations. So, and then he goes on to say, this duplicitous policy has been described in Hebrew as Yorim ve Bochim, or shooting and crying. It is operationalized by the Israeli right-wing settlers and in India by murderous far-right paramilitary Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh RSS thugs. Both aim to pulverize Palestinians and Kashmiris and then bemoan their sufferings and say, we gave them a chance for peace if only they took it. So that remind me again.
I want to say
wait. So let me ask a question first. Remind me again. Who was driven out of their home in Kashmir? Were the Muslims driven out of Kashmir Valley, or were the Hindus?
So that's what I was trying to say, Ajay bhai. So there is a fundamental flaw in this article, because in an effort to bring up a common enemy, which is the Jew and the Hindu, and pit them against his own constituency, which is the global Islamist constituency, a fatal mistake that the author makes is that he actually doesn't stick to reality and truth. First of all, in Jammu and Kashmir, he brings up Kashmir because that's his favorite topic, and he pretends to be a Kashmir-focused author. The major flaw that he doesn't talk about is the fact that everybody in Kashmir who is of Hindu descent is a native Kashmiri. They have been native in Kashmir Valley for thousands of years. If anything, the colonial settlers in Kashmir are not the Hindus, it is the Muslims of Kashmir. In fact, many of them continue to keep their last names that they had from their Central Asian ancestry. In fact, they take pride in that. If you go to Kashmir Valley, the people who think that they came from Tabriz or from Bukhara or from, you name it, part of the caliphate and conquered Kashmir as they look at it, they won't even marry local Kashmiris because that's their level of class awareness that they have. So if there is anybody who is a colonial settler in Jammu and Kashmir, it is the Sunni Muslims and the Muslim elite who are driving this separatist narrative. So, that is a historically factual error that the author is making. And that if you just point that out in this article, the entire article falls apart and looks like an Islamist propaganda. So I'll just do that. I'll just leave it at that. And that's it, I think.
Repeating a lie, as you have said in some other context, and we've all read it in one place or the other, repeating a lie multiple times does not make it true. Saying that RSS is far-right military, paramilitary organization made of thugs does not make it right. People who are the viewers of this show know this. People around the world, other than people who write this kind of crap, know it. That just because calling RSS a paramilitary organization does not make it paramilitary. People in RSS are not bearing any arms. RSS is not far right. RSS asks for equal rights for all Indians. That does not make it far right. And there is absolutely zero evidence to label RSS as an organization made of murderers or thugs when RSS Swayamsevaks are getting killed in West Bengal, when RSS Swayamsevaks are getting killed in Kerala, and RSS, where people who profess Hindu faith are getting killed and murdered across India, regularly. So to name RSS and to claim that RSS is seeking to pulverize Kashmiris, that is nothing but propagation of not just a particular ideology, a particular way of thinking that has led to the murders of, who knows, about Utsada, would you say about 80 million Hindus since year 700 AD, or 85 million Hindus? It is continuation of that kind of superiority complex while still playing the victim card. What this author is saying about Hindus actually don't apply to Hindus. If you read this article, it's very telling what the author's thinking is. He says this: Amarnath Yatra needs to be immediately stopped, and the Indian government must be compelled to prevent this crime against humanity from occurring. The consequence of such actions will lead to grave breaches of the Third and Fourth Geneva Conventions, including inhumane treatment and willfully causing great suffering of serious bodily injuries. By allowing the Amarnath Yatra Hindu pilgrimage, the Modi government aims to weaponize pandemic, recklessly endanger lives, and further entrench military occupation of the disputed territory to enforce homogenization. What could be more catastrophic than facilitating a super spreader event in disputed territory of Kashmir? First of all, it is not. The only part that is disputed is the part that is occupied by Pakistan. The rest of it is not disputed. Even that is only disputed to the extent that Pakistan disputes it. From our perspective, there is no dispute. It's Kashmir belongs to India. Part of it is occupied by China. Part of it is occupied by Pakistan. There's no dispute about that. There's absolutely no dispute. If people want to occupy it forcibly or otherwise, claim dispute. The rest of us, we already know it's not a dispute, right?
What do you expect us? That's why I gave you the biodata of the individual who wrote this article. He's somebody of Kashmiri origin who grew up in Pakistan and Europe and works in Qatar and promotes Islamist causes. So that's the convergence of everything that terrorism in Kashmiri represents. So why would he consider us as friends, us as even rational human beings? Everything that is Hindu and everything that is India about Kashmir and its history needs to be taken down. And his friends in Pakistani Punjab and in Islamabad are funding and supporting an armed insurgency for that for the last 40 years. So he's just a pen version of that armed struggle. And he's quite open about it. I mean, the author has written for everything and everybody who supports terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir and in other parts of the world.
All right. Let me read some comments. So Thara Narasimhanji, let me start with Venkatesh Santoshji, who has said that these journalists are working with impunity despite spreading venom, which is carefully sandwiched by using their art of writing. Even courts cannot do anything with these narratives as they cry freedom of speech under that threat. Bimal Shalatji has agreed with that. And then Thara Narasimhanji has said, yes, Chakrabarti, this is good to expose and share the intentions of the writer. Tanya Baker has said, narcissistic cultures like the Islamists and China are expert gaslighters. Hindus need to propagate the facts and their own narrative. And then Tanya Baker continues so these are some of the comments that we have on various forums where this show is being broadcast. This is actually quite fun. So that this is the Hindu Pact and World Hindu Council of America Chicago chapter did, where the Indian community stood in solidarity with Israel, where you know that there were 3,000, or more rockets that were fired on Israel, and Israel had a right to defend itself, and the Chicago Indian community stood in solidarity with Israel. And you can see several of the Hindu Pact and World Hindu Council of America, VHPA, uh, you know, karyakartas, activists who came out and stood against terrorism and stood with the Jewish community in Chicago.
As we had an entire show dedicated to this topic, I think 2 shows ago, Jai. So I would encourage all our listeners and viewers to join, to go back into our, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, go back and look at the show that we had a detailed conversation on this topic vis-a-vis Israel and the latest conflagration in Gaza. And so I would not get into the details of the relationship between why and how many Indian Americans are sympathize and empathize with the plight of the Jewish community in the Middle East, especially in areas surrounding Gaza, where they face regular attacks. There are also many Indian Americans and Hindus who also empathize with the Palestinians, and many of them support the two-state solution. So there is a whole spectrum of people in the community, Indian American community and Hindu American communities, that support different causes on both sides. But what I have seen most common amongst Hindus and in America and Indian Americans also is the fact that they both support non-violence. They both empathize with the sides that support non-violence in the Middle East, in Gaza, in Israel. And that is why every time there is a open confrontation, there are rockets being fired in the hundreds, people come out and empathize with both sides. And in this case, because Israel faced such a massive onslaught of rockets, it is quite natural for the Indian American community and Indian community to support the Israelis. And I think that was a very good gesture from the community.
I think we had this debate already, so I don't want to re-litigate the case that I made. But I said that, hey, look, I have a simple calculation. Is Hamas going to support Hindus in Kashmir? If they're not, then my decision is made. I don't seek a balance because the other side has not sought the balance. So that I want to move on to this really interesting article that most people would not know about, and I think this is something that is kind of worth just talking about a little bit. It's a news item. It says that Pakistani Hindu lawmaker submits bill seeking religious minorities to be referred to as non-Muslims, and there's a subtext to it, and it says the view, in his view, it is the minority, labeling them as minorities gives the impression of being second-class citizen. So they want to be classified as non-Muslims and not as minorities. Usada, why do you think they're doing this? Why would they want to be called? Why would they want to be called as non-Muslims instead of religious minorities?
The main point that many people don't understand is that in countries like Pakistan, where which is overwhelmingly Islamic in nature and which is overwhelmingly very anti-Hindu, anti-non-Muslim, if I can put it in a better way. Majority of the people in Pakistan support the blasphemy law. So that is a very good indicator of how anti-non-Muslim they are. In countries like this, whenever there will be Sharia law, Pakistan right now doesn't have full Sharia law implementation, but at some point, given the way it is radicalized, it may happen. So whenever there is Sharia law implementation, actually getting protection as non-Muslim is slightly better than being treated as minorities, because Sharia law has strict regulation and prescriptions, and it will always treat non-Muslims as second-class citizens. The challenge here is whether to be treated as second class citizens or whether to be treated as fourth class citizen worthy of extermination. And that's where I think the whole conversation is. It's really sad that this conversation is happening in the 21st century. But then again, if we don't talk about it, it will continue to happen.
This is from Times of India. And the article says Pak Sikh leadership admits its Granthi alerted Sikhs but tries to downplay the incident. Now, this is a really interesting article. So the Granthi of one of the Gurudwaras in Pakistan warned the Sikhs. Granthi is, by the way, the head religious priest or head priest of a Gurudwara. So the head priest of the Gurudwara alerted the Sikhs in Lahore and in a couple of other places in Pakistan that, look, it is not safe for the Sikhs. So be careful. You'll get beaten up. You get the Sikhs girl may get abducted and all the other things, right? So he warned the Sikhs of Pakistan to be careful. Now, Gopal Singh Chawla, who is a Khalistani, a Pakistani Sikh, but a Khalistani. Now, instead of protecting his own community, starts downplaying this by saying that this has nothing to do with the Sikhs being in danger. It is just Sikhs are being the Granthi was alerting the Sikhs because of the the challenges of maintaining the Sikh lifestyle, and the challenges that you have in terms of alcoholism or drug or other moral turpitudes, right? So this is the person who takes a clearly a life and violence kind of threats, and he turns it into this. It is really nothing to do with danger to the Sikh community.
I think he needs his paycheck. Gopal Singh Chawla it's a sad to have the name Gopal, Lord Krishna's name, and be a Khalistani separatist, hating Hindus to that degree. But then again, I don't think Gopal Singh Chawla, the Khalistani who lives in Pakistan, has a future. I think he's just going to make a living, getting some salary from people in Islamabad, and his movement is going to fade away unless he actually takes on the Pakistani state and reclaims back the Khalsa territory that Pakistan is built on. 90% of the territory of Maharaja Ranjit Singh falls in Pakistan. So if Gopal Singh has any desire to achieve any credibility, he has to take on the Pakistani state. And I don't think he can do that because his bread and butter comes from there.
So I'm now going to move on, and we're quickly moving on towards the end of this, but I have a challenge for you. I want to ask you this question, and I think that, this can go either way also. So you have to be, when you do a show like this, you have to be ready for not just the compliments that come your way, but you have to sometimes be ready for not so complimentary things come your way if you take a hard stance. So I want to ask you this question. Kim Kardashian wearing the Om earrings, so that offensive appropriation of culture, or it's okay?
The only thing that makes me alarmed about this picture is the fact that it shares Kim Kardashian is 40 years old, and that tells how old I am getting.
So that you are not offended by her wearing the Om earrings.
I think they're really large-sized earrings, and they make the Om look very prominent. I feel happy that Hollywood.
So can you just say yes or no? We're not politicians, right? You can.
Well, I'm not offended at all by it. Okay. Let me be very vehement about it. And we Hindus have, in my opinion, have far more serious, concerning, dehumanizing efforts being done to our community than worry about Kim Kardashian's earrings with Om on them.
I founded American Hindus Against Defamation, AHAD, and we have taken up a lot of substantive issues. And I want someone to come and convince me as to why wearing Om earring is not a earring made of Hindu deity. So it's not like it's Ganesha. It's not like it's Durga Mata or Amba Mata or Saraswati Mata or any of that. It is an Om symbol, which people put it on homes. People put it in their cars. It's like swastika. People wear swastika pendants. People have worn it for 7,000, 10,000 years in India. People have used Om as inspiration everywhere, and it may be a fashion statement. I would like to know, Sudha, why Hindus were so offended. And there is a litany of comments on Twitter. And Twitter, there's really no end to people getting offended by things that are the things that are on Twitter. So that I share your thoughts. I personally am not offended, and I am open to somebody making a case as to why I should be offended. But otherwise, I think that as long as the Hindu deity is not presented, so that I'm not going to be outraged. I'm not going to be outraged by this. And again, I am going to wait for all these dozens of people who are offended on Twitter, and I'm going to wait for them to tell me why I should be offended.
I would just suggest everybody who is offended by this to donate $1,000 to Hindu Pact so that we can talk about the genocides of the Hindu communities for the last 1,000 years.
Utsada, let me share the screen for the good news of the week. Now we are on to our 3 regular segments. So Utsada, the good news of the week, number 1, good news of the week. Let's see. UK has the first Lord Jagannath temple in Bath. So this is for the first time and UK has a lot of Hindu mandirs. There are a lot of Hindus in UK. And for the first time in UK, now they have the Lord Jagannath temple in Bath. So that congratulations to the Hindu community in UK for this achievement.
Very good news to see. The more diversity of Hindu deities appear globally, I think the communities around these temples will feel and understand the value of diversity of worship, diversity of belief, diversity of thought process, diversity of philosophy. I think if there is all these global organizations that support and fund efforts to de-radicalize populations around the world, first suggestion to them, build a couple of Hindu temples there. You will see how quickly the population de-radicalizes.
Exactly. Well said, Utsada. So our compliments to the Hindu community in UK. Next regular segment, Utsada, is the Hindu Seva Act of the week. And here we go. So that in the spirit of Lokahitam, once again, the Hindu Seva Act of the week is the World Hindu Council of America, or VHPA, our parent organization, doing all the fundraising for COVID-19 efforts in India. I'm glad to report, Utsada, we are now close to $1.75 million raised as VHPA, and contributed to various COVID-19 related efforts for the COVID second wave in Bharat, in India. Please, I urge everyone who is watching this, please go to vhpamerica.org, click on the donate button, and please do whatever you can to help the COVID-19 relief efforts in India. We are raising funds for respirators. We are raising funds for the ecologically sustainable machines for cremation and various other activities. So please go to vhpamerica.org, click on the donate button, and do the best you can. Thank you on that. And finally, Utsada, the most eagerly awaited segment of the week. Utsada, what what is the most eagerly awaited segment of the week, Utsada?
The Hindu
The
hater of the
Hindu hater of the week. The Hindu phobe of the week, rather. Right? We changed it from Hindu hater of the week. And the Hindu phobe of the week, Utsada, is Utsada, the Hindu phobe of the week. Why don't you do the big reveal? Tell us, why is this offensive?
So I am a somebody who comes from a creative field. I really appreciate freedom of creativity. I appreciate freedom of speech. I also understand and absolutely take pride in the fact how much diversity of philosophy, diversity of representation has given freedom and longevity to Hindu thought process throughout its extremely resilient and extremely evolutionary history. But I draw the line at the point where tropes of hate become creative outlets. And when I say tropes of hate, as you can see on this picture, a very common trope of hate that is used against Hindus globally, including by people who commit genocide and murder in places like Kashmir, and used to be done in Bangladesh when it was East Pakistan, and today even done in Pakistan, is the fact that Hindus are very negatively represented as cow piss drinkers, or the drinkers of cow's urine. And when that kind of a hate trope is used to show creativity, it only furthers the hatred towards the Hindu community. It's like, in the 1930s and 40s, when cartoonists in Europe, especially cartoonists with Nazi background, would try to show Jews as rats in their cartoons. And that dehumanized the Jewish community to the point where they were getting killed and nobody had any compunctions or any hurt while they were doing it.
One thing I do want to say is that imagine if this particular cartoon is printed and posted in all the high schools and middle schools across America, what would it do to a Hindu kid who is growing up in America? That is something that needs to be thought about. And I was going to bring, I was maybe going to bring it up, maybe not going to bring up, but Anne has said in the text that in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, people drink the camel urine and tout a lot of benefits of that. Today we are not going to discuss the benefits and or the lack thereof of camel urine, not the purpose of this particular show. But every culture, suffice it to say that these are every region, every culture, people have through the history discovered a few things and they propagate it. And to use that to denigrate the entire community, if someone wants to do a scientific research on it, welcome to do that. But this is not something you take and then you denigrate Hindus with. Utsada, I also want to make a point that we are not Charlie Hebdo. We are not going to, and we are not the people opposing Charlie Hebdo. So we are not the people who are going to call for physical violence. We are not going to for a person who is putting out cartoons. We are not the people who are going to say that behead a cartoonist for depicting Hindus in this light. All we are saying is that Hindus be vigilant, look at what is coming, and register your protest, and in a peaceful manner, register your outrage in a peaceful manner, so that it does not come back and affect your kids. We are not going to call for violence or any of that against anyone, right?
No, my point is that in this whole conversation, we looked in today's program, we looked at multiple news items and from around the world. And I think the point that we are trying to make here is that if there's anything that Hindus bring to the table, it is moderation, rationality, and equanimity of opinion. And I think that what has been our strength throughout. And everybody who attacks us either uses trauma and fallacy or uses their own view of the world from an extreme position to dehumanize us, to dehumanize Hindus. In today's conversation, we also saw how they dehumanize the Jewish community. So my suggestion to everybody around us is to continue to amplify the voices that we have that represent rational thinking, that represent Hindu diversity of philosophies. And I think there is something that the world can learn from it, most so our own children. And that is the most important part that we have been missing out.
Thank you. Today, as a final treat today, we have a special, that every show, we have a special opening intro and extra, that means closing out tune, music that is created just for that episode of Hindu Lounge by a group called Decibels. So that today is a special day. It's a special day because Decibel this week, not only they created a tune for us, a special tune for us, but this week's tune was, Decibel was joined by a YouTube sensation, Vikram Shankar. And Vikram Shankar Utsoda is a Hindu youth who was born and brought up in America, who has his own YouTube channel, is a sensation on YouTube. He has played music for movies and games, etc. So he joins Decibels on keyboard and for the original composition for Hindu Lounge number 56. So that as we leave, we are going to play this amazing tune created just for Hindu Lounge number 56. Decibels joined by YouTube sensation Vikram Shankar. Please check out Vikram Shankar on YouTube. And so that with that, I want to once again say this is Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact, the policy research and advocacy initiative of World Hindu Council of America, with host Utsav Chakrabarti, the executive director of Hindu Pact. I am Ajay Shah, and I'm the president of World Hindu Council of America. We come live every week at 11 o'clock Eastern, and on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. And we always want to hear from you and talk with you. Please stay tuned for this very special tune created just for Hindu Lounge number 56. So with that, thank you. And we'll do this again next week.